Welcome once again to the AskOkey podcast, coming to you from Studio One, a familiar sight to many of you, I'm sure. Pete here with you, and my guest, the Proff, man who needs no introduction, as usual. Now, don't forget, before we start, like and subscribe to things that you have to do if you haven't done so already. Today, we have another guest with us. This headless man here is our model, and we're going to be talking about the jacket, or the coat rather, and all sorts of things about it, things that you need to know about coats. So bear with us. My job is simply to turn on the taps, as it were, and Prof will free associate his way through the next hour. And so let's get started here. Now what we have is a one-button AskOkey jacket, is it?
Yes.
Now,
yes.
Why do you not have a little button hole here like people usually do on a jacket like this?
Well, this is designed as a one button, and you can't just arbitrarily include another hole there.
Okay.
Because when you design a jacket, there's something called balance. And
right.
Depending on the number of buttons the coat has been assigned, it's going to affect the overall balance. It's going to affect the gorge height. It's going to affect the lapel roll. It's going to affect where the pockets are placed and the overall length of the coat. And so when you've designed a one-button coat, right, it comes with a certain set of proportions.
Right, okay.
And so you can't just as it were, cut another button and say, okay, we're going to make it a two-button.
Right.
If you're going to design this as a two-button, then everything, the entire balance of the coat needs to be modified and adjusted. Absolutely.
Interesting.
Similar with a three-button. You couldn't just sort of add a third button there. No. It just screws up everything.
It would.
So,
so it's purpose-built.
One has to bear how many buttons the coat is going to be from the onset, from the design stage. And then that is going to determine the entire balance of the coat, the gorge height, the lapel width, where the lapel rolls, the positioning of the pockets, and things of that nature.
So this looks quite high, this button. Where would this button normally be placed? At the waist, I suppose?
At the natural waist.
Okay.
This
and then
precisely at the natural waist.
So we have a little bit of an indent here.
Exactly.
On the mannequin.
Now, personally, I like to design. This is my own design philosophy. I'm not saying it's cardinal. This is not canon. When I look at a coat from top to bottom, I like to pick the midpoint or about the midpoint as the waist button.
Right, okay.
So I like to place the waist button somewhere sort of around the midpoint of the jacket.
Yes.
For me, it just looks much more balanced.
Right.
What you see with a lot of modern jackets is because the jackets are short, first of all.
Right.
The buttoning points tend to fall sort of closer to the bottom of the jacket.
So it looks lower.
It looks lower, but it might not be lower on the wearer, right? But because the coat is cut so short. So that is why my coats typically look long. Because I like this. I like to flare the skirt.
Right.
I like the flare of the skirt, and
Right.
you need a lot of room and runway to really shape the coat.
Yes, you do.
If the coat were shorter, of course you could shape it, but it's not going to be as nearly as pronounced as a longer coat.
No. I
So,
see.
Again, these are sort of rules of thumb that I have developed sort of through Rock of Eye.
Yes.
Be it a two-button coat or three-button coat, the buttoning button, which is the waist button, in my own sort of using my own artistic eye, usually somewhere about halfway.
Right.
About halfway between, maybe not exactly, maybe closer to sort of more like 2/3, 1/3. Not exactly 2/3, but you understand what I mean.
A little bit
slightly lower than halfway. And to me, that waistline, that waist point allows you to sort of balance all the elements of the coat.
So it might be, the button might be a little bit above your waist or a little bit below it, as long as it's going to get halfway. So if you've got a long upper body, then it'll be a bit higher. If you've got a very short upper body, then it'll be a bit lower. Interesting. So that's part of it. Now what we've got here is we've got the one button with the sort of standard lapels, similar to what you'd have on a two button. Now, when you say the gorge height, so that's this line here, I take it.
The gorge is right here. The gorge is where the collar meets the lapel, right there. So that is a gorge line right there. If you draw a straight line across from there to right there, right, crossing the tie.
And that's about 3 or 4 inches above the pocket, and it's a little bit, so it's placed. I believe there's a reason for putting it there and not a bit up high.
Well, that's again, this is what I would call a classic gorge. With modern coats, you're going to see sort of a higher gorge line, right, with a shorter collar.
Yes.
I like a longer collar.
Okay.
Right? I like a longer collar, and I like sort of this sort of more classic, not a low gorge, not the Armani 80s, not the Armani 80s low gorge, but sort of a classic medium gorge.
Right, okay. Yes, I remember those from the 80s, actually. And
sometimes with those high gorges, it just feels like the jacket is just going to fall off your shoulders visually. And you know, for the double-breasted coat, sometimes with those high gorges, you can even see the peak of the coat
they go over the shoulders.
Going over the shoulders, which looks just terrible. When you bring the gorge down, right, it sort of pushes the lapel down and it keeps things fairly tame.
Now, it's interesting you mentioned those 80s jackets because they were probably an inch, at least half an inch below where this one is. And the little notch here isn't exactly a right angle. It's an acute angle, but it's not too narrow.
Yes.
Now, I know that sometimes people have a much narrower
that's what they call the French comes to Luca.
French,
comes to Luca. It's called a fish mouth.
Right.
It's called a fish mouth gorge. It's something like this. It almost sort of borders on like a double-breasted type gorge, but it's a very French or Parisian thing.
And then if we look at the lapels, I'm just going to undo this one here. If we look at the lapels coming down, you've got quite a lot of work in here, quite a lot of fabric in here, haven't you? Well, if we start with the collar's got a lot in it. It's well padded or well stuffed, as it were. There's your Melton stitched on there, and you've got a little piece sort of folded over here. So you make your collar, I take it, first.
This is a hand-felled collar. So this is what you might call a hand-felled collar. And you can see all the handwork. So everything is basically, there's a piece of canvas in there.
Stitching all over it, isn't
Absolutely.
there?
There's a piece of canvas between the exterior, within the fabric.
Right.
And basically that helps shape
the collar.
The canvas is what helps shape the collar. And the canvas is basted by hand. You can see the pick stitching.
Yes, you can, yes.
It's manually basted into, and it's shaped. Actually, it's ironed, right? So, you know, before you put it in, you have to sort of shape the collar by
you
iron.
Curve it.
You curve it, absolutely, because your neck is a curve. And that's how you prevent things like a collar gap. So if you see a collar that hasn't been fitted properly or ironed properly or doesn't have enough curvature on it, it's going to always be fighting to get back into a straight position. You understand? So, you know, when it's not ironed, when it doesn't have that curvature, or when it hasn't been, you know, sort of pressed properly or basted properly, it's going to be fighting to go back into a straight position. And when it does that, what happens is that it creates a collar gap.
Right, okay.
You understand?
That's the reason now we know.
Exactly. So the collar is trying to go, it's fighting you. It's
trying to straighten out.
It's trying to straighten out.
Trying to straighten out.
Because it hasn't been properly.
Amazing.
So there you have it. This is what you call a hand-felled collar.
Hand-felled collar.
It's what you call a hand-felled collar.
Yes.
And then, of course, when it's all done, it's hand-stitched. You can see sort of the stitching.
Yes, you can.
It's stitched back onto the body of the coat.
Right,
by hand.
right. And it comes down there, and that's made of Melton cloth.
Well, it's just a covering.
Sort of a felt cloth.
The backside is just a felt cloth. But inside this piece is a canvas. Inside, like in between, it's an interlining between this Melton piece,
and that gives it its strength.
Exactly.
Okay. So you
and flexibility
of course this is part of why you do your bespoke jacket, because you can't get a collar to fit your neck actually.
A machine made product.
If it's made to a standard size or standard pattern. So we have the collar there, quite a long collar, as you said. Very sturdy piece of work. And then down here, you've got these lapels. Now, you'll notice, everybody, that the lapels don't lie flat. They roll down, and again, they are not basted, but there's a tape inside, isn't there, with the canvas on the back?
So basically, the way the canvas works, right, is that you have the canvas runs all the way from the shoulder seam.
From the shoulder seam.
Right? It's one piece of canvas. Look at this, Pete. It's one piece of canvas that goes from here. This is all one piece.
Right.
Of canvas that goes all the way down.
Yes.
To the bottom.
So it's like a jacket inside a jacket.
Right. There's one layer. Actually, there are 3 layers. There are 3 layers, right? There's 3 layers. There's one that stops here, another one that stops here, and then the last one goes all the way. But for the purposes of this discussion, we're just going to assume that a fully canvas jacket is a jacket with a canvas that goes all the way from the shoulder seam all the way to the hem.
Yes.
Now why do you...
Sorry to break your stride there. When we say canvas, we don't actually mean canvas like a sail canvas. We mean sort of a horsehair.
Interlining.
Hymen?
It's a horsehair, whatever.
Made of horsehair.
It's made of horsehair. Yeah. But it's a canvas. It's basically what gives the coat its shape, right? It's more. It sort of allows it to mold.
Yeah, and if you didn't have it, if you didn't have the canvas, the inside and the outside would come apart, wouldn't they?
Well, if you didn't have the canvas, typically there's something called a fused garment. Right?
Yeah, you could glue it together.
So you need interlining, right? Period. For any coat, you need interlining because sort of like the outside, right? This side and this side.
Yeah, they wouldn't stick together otherwise.
So you need something in between. So, for cheap coats, they use fusing or fusible. Which is glue. Yeah. It's just a black kind of synthetic material, and they glue it. Basically, they glue the 2 sides together. Yep. With an interlining or a proper canvas, it's floating.
Yep.
It's called a floating canvas. So you have the canvas inside and it's basted. It is sewn onto the outside of this coat.
Yes, you can usually see some stitching.
You can see the stitches
behind the lapels, and you can see the stitches here.
Exactly.
Where it's been stitched on. Yes.
Exactly. So you can see the stitches now. The point you were trying to make earlier is why the lapel rolls, and the lapel rolls because again, this is one piece of canvas coming all the way down here. Yep. And so when you baste this, right, it is springy.
Yep.
See, it is springy. It springs back into shape. It is springy. If there is no canvas, if this is a basted coat, for instance, this would fall flat and dead.
Yeah.
Right? Because the fuse doesn't have the same spring. It doesn't have the same sort of, what do you call it?
Yeah. Spring. Resilience.
Resilience or sort of the liveliness of the canvas. Exactly.
So going from the top, we've got 3 pieces of canvas. We've got this collar. And correct me if I'm wrong, when they make these jackets, when you make them and the team makes them, you start at the top. You don't just stitch panels together. You start the construction here, and the collar sort of gives it its shape, doesn't it? Or does it?
Pete, sort of when it comes out of the cutting room, right? Everything comes out in different strips.
Yeah.
Right? For instance, this front panel, right here.
Yep.
Is a completely different piece, right?
That's right.
The back panel, like starting from here, is another piece, and the sleeves and so on and so forth. So, when you cut the pattern on the cutting table, you're cutting all these different sort of parts. And for instance, the front goes to the sewing table first to put all the canvas and the innards. So when you see them on the sewing table, sometimes you can see them with just this one panel, just fitting all the innards that goes into sort of this one panel, right? Yep. And then when they're done with the front, right, because this is what really needs all the reinforcement and all the kind of construction. The back is simple. It's just a piece of cloth. Same as the sleeves, piece of cloth.
Yes.
So when they're done with the front, right, they now take it to the assembler, right? Assuming sort of you're working in a job shop.
Yep.
If you're working with sort of a one-man show tailor, he does everything himself, right? He does, So, but if you're working in a job shop where someone is handling like we do, someone handles this part, and then somebody else kind of puts everything
it together. Yeah.
They now, when they finish each segment, they send it to the assembler, who now starts to sort of put together, so the armhole, sort of, put all this, so attach the collar and so on and so forth. So there is no specific order. It's not like you start with the collar. It depends on who's working on it and sort of their specific style. They could decide to start with the sleeves, for instance.
I suppose they could, yeah, and then attach them to the jacket when it's ready.
Correct.
Yeah. And we've got here, interesting, I think, I'm not sure if you can see this out in Cyberland, but the shoulder seam points back a little bit. Now, why is that, Prof?
It's going to differ for everyone, right? It's going to differ for everyone, and it's going to depend on your posture.
Right, okay.
Right, so it's going to depend on your posture, whether you stand erect or whether sort of you're, sort of you stand hips forward and so on and so forth. There is no kind of specific, there is no rule that says it has to be bent at any specific angle.
Right, okay.
When you're fitted, right, when you're done, when we do the test of fit or the basting, right, you check for posture and things like that. For instance, I'll give you an example. If there's a front-back balance issue, and a front-back balance is, say, for instance, the front is lower.
Yeah, or higher.
Right? So if there's a front-back balance, then you have to sort of take the fabric in from the seam. You have to tear open this seam, right? And pull the fabric off.
Pull it up,
to sort of to balance this out.
Yeah.
So there is no, there's no specific angle that this should be at. Right. It's all going to depend on the individual.
The man who's wearing it.
Exactly.
Yes. And so you've got this part, and there's the chest, and you've been talking about that. The canvas that goes all the way down. So they cut the panels in the cutting room. They cut the pieces, and when they put it together, I noticed they put a dart in here, and that is what, to get the shape. So they know how much of a dart they've got to put in, and that goes sort of halfway down the chest.
It depends on the person too. So if you're very athletic, very athletic, and sort of basically what's a dart? A dart is used to basically to sort of to how can I say, to bridge too wide.
Right. Pull them together,
To pull them together. So you have a very narrow waist and a broad chest, right? It's a very steep curve. It's a huge drop. So a dart is used to sort of control that drop, because if it were one piece of cloth, right, it would just fall straight. You can't.
It would. No. Now, interestingly enough, when they do the back, you'll notice that the back is not like perfectly tight. It's all leaves, at least on our coats, there's quite a bit of extra there, which you call the back drape, and that, of course, gives you the mobility.
Correct.
And you've got quite a high armhole here, and so you've got there's your seam there, there's your seam down the side there. So we can really see on this one how it's all put together. Now, note the sleeves, everybody. What you'll see here, see how the sleeves hang? They don't have that sort of crumple at the back. And how do we get that, Prof? Where, how so often the sleeves are sort of crumpled up at the back?
Well, that means if it's crumpled up at the back, for instance, okay, so look at this mathematically or sort of geometrically, okay? Now, this is sitting on a mannequin, so you can't really sort of make a fair assessment as to whether the pitch is correct.
Sure.
But if someone were to wear this and it's crumpling at the back like that, right? What does that tell you?
Well, it tells you, I suppose, that it's pitched too far back.
Exactly.
For his position.
Exactly. So if it's crumpling at the back like that, right?
Yeah.
Like that, that means it needs to be rotated.
Right.
Sleeve needs to be pitched forward, right? So you pitch it slightly forward, right?
Again, depending on the shoulder posture.
Absolutely.
And everything.
So, but usually when you have this gathering back here, then the sleeve needs to be pitched slightly forward, right? And if it's gathering here, I bet you it's also sort of kind of breaking and doing
you'll get
all sorts of stuff.
You'll get some crumple underneath. And you'll notice here as well that there's always going to be a little bit of extra here.
Yeah, because you need that fullness.
You just need that. So
in the upper arm.
Yeah, interestingly, then a really good handmade coat like this will never look 100% sort of smoothly perfect. You've got to have a little bit of extra fold there. And it comes down there, and then you've got this sort of what we would call the back drape there. Now, for a single-breasted jacket, the one button, as you said, it's all designed to be one thing. You can't just say, would you like a 3-button? You're wearing, on the other hand, a 3-button. Let's put a 3-button on the model here and see how it looks. This is
a 2-roll 3.
Sorry, a 2-roll 3.
Not a true 3-button.
Not a true 3-button. Okay, let's put that on there. So now, it's not just that we've added a button. We've actually got a jacket designed to have
3 buttons.
3 buttons, 2, and you said it's a 2-roll to 3.
This is a 3 rolling to...
Sorry, a 3 rolling to 2.
Correct.
So it's got 3 buttons, but it's sort of like a 2-button.
This is hidden.
So the top button is hidden, and the top button hole is kind of under the lapel. But we've got the same feature, a little bit wider, I think, here, fish mouth shape here. But other than that, we've got the darts. So you effectively using one sort of method, and then you adjust your design, I take it, depending on how many buttons you're going to have. Is this button in the same sort of position as that one was?
It would be approximately, and again, there is no, there is no sort of hard and fast rule. You have to actually put it on the wearer to see where the natural waist is. But I find in my own case, given my proportions, my natural waist always falls sort of around that halfway mark. Right. Between sort of the top and the bottom.
And the pattern has an effect here, doesn't it? Because that big check could make it look longer or shorter.
Possibly.
This is a smaller, much smaller check, more muted pattern. Very nice pattern. And then here, if we just continue here, you've got this buttonhole here on the left. It's curious, Prof, why the buttonhole is always on the left. And I presume it's so that you can reach with your right hand and put the little rose or whatever it is, the boutonniere, in there with your right hand.
Correct.
I have seen a buttonhole on either side on vintage jackets, and then you have the barchetta pocket, and it's curved slightly. Now, if it were just straight across, it would look a little odd, probably. So you use that curve to give it a nice sweep up there.
Correct.
And that helps the optical illusion. And then I think we've got patch pockets here.
Yes.
With no flap. Now, tell us about the patch pockets, because there's a sort of technique to that, isn't there?
Yeah, we call this a sort of a wine glass shape. So it's not just, as you can see, it's not just a straight line, right? So there's a little bit of an arch to drafting this pocket. It's sort of shaped like a wine glass.
That's right.
At the bottom, and sort of narrows at the top.
So if it's just a rectangle, it'll look too wide at the top.
It would look odd.
Yes.
See, because the human body is in 3D. When you wear it, right, it actually looks like a straight pocket.
Yeah, that's what I mean, yes.
But because the human, look at, for instance, what I'm wearing is a wine glass pocket. So if you look at it from the side, right, it looks like a straight pocket, but it's not straight.
No.
It's angled, and it's sort of shaped because, again, the human body is in 3 dimensions.
The human body is 3 dimensions.
So we have to create we have to sort of angle this slightly and create these curves.
Yes.
So it doesn't look awkward, when you actually have it on.
Indeed, and of course, that I suppose
you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
If you were straight, when you have it on, the lines would be off.
Yep.
They would be bent.
Yeah, and interesting how the workmen have managed to get that beautiful pattern matching. I notice they don't bother pattern matching here, but certainly for the pocket, all the way down there. And maybe difficult to do, maybe not so difficult with small checks, but I would imagine with large checks, you've got to make sure you get it right lined up there. I noticed some pattern matching here. You're maybe not fussy so much about the pattern matching at the sleeve.
Yeah.
But definitely on the front there. Isn't that nice there? Now, these buttonholes, are these what you call Milanese buttonholes?
Well, I mean, people have all sorts of names, but these are all handmade. They're all handmade buttonholes. Some people,
Well, you can tell that from looking at the back, can't you?
Yeah, you can see. If you can see how rough.
Yeah, they are. Yes.
If it's done by a machine, it would be smoother. It would be very smooth and very easy.
Yes, that's right. Yes. Yeah. They would look exactly the same.
Right.
inside and out. So that's essentially the, hang on. So that's the secret. Canvas, design, and put it all together with the inside and the outside, your darts, and cutting everything so that it's to be worn. Because you could, of course, do it for a mannequin, but that wouldn't really look very good once you start wearing it and moving around in it. We'll be right back after station identification. See you in a minute. Have you been dreaming about an AskOkey suit for the past several months or years? Of going about in the unique style that AskOkey can deliver for you? Now's your chance. An opportunity for you to have an AskOkey suit through our made-to-measure line. Fill the form and we'll get back to you and let you know when it's about to launch so that you can get in front of all the others. Bye for now. Welcome back. Before we start talking about and looking at this mannequin here and this jacket and getting Prof to explain some of the things about it, take a look at Prof's suit, because I think this is quite striking. Now, we were looking at a 3-roll 2, a 2-roll 3 or 3-roll 2?
3-roll 2.
A 3-roll 2 jacket a moment ago, and now we have a 3-button.
A proper 3-button.
A proper 3-button with the patch pockets. And one thing I noticed about these patches, Prof, is that they actually come up a little bit at the back. Then it's not a straight line.
No,
it comes up
angled.
A bit at the back, isn't it? Angled. And you can really see the darts here. And what is this? This is Fox Brothers.
Yes, this is sort of a wool linen mix.
Ah, okay.
Yes, it's sort of a wool linen blend.
Right, okay.
Yes.
Very smart. It's a kind of basket weave.
Yes.
With sort of 2 tones of brown, greenish brown. Greenish brown, I would say. Now, what we said earlier, remember Prof was talking about his waist, or the middle point. So this button is here at the midpoint. Because remember he was saying how it ought to bisect. So it bisects there. And we have the signature full cut, the double F full cut. Now let's take a look at these, because these really are very striking indeed. It's partly the fabric, I think, and it's obviously partly the work of the designer, namely Prof, and the tailor, but these seem to be quite successful. And they hang very, very well, and there's the full double F full cut. How high is your cuff, Prof? 2 inches?
That's about 2 inches. All my cuffs are 2 inches.
Right.
That's the full McCoy, as we would say.
Indeed, yes.
24
inches leg opening, yeah.
Leg opening, which is just about good, maybe
foot
3/4
there,
of my shoes. So this
3/4 of your shoe, yes.
This is the real McCoy. This is for those who are brave enough to attempt.
Yes, not for the faint-hearted.
No,
not for the faint-hearted. But you could do worse. Very comfortable. And if you get them in a fabric like this, they hang very, very well.
Absolutely.
Better, I think, than the pure linen, actually.
Because it's got more weight.
What is it, about a 15 ounce?
It's got to be somewhere up there. It's got to be somewhere up there.
Yes, indeed.
16 ounce.
Now, the rise gets a bit higher as the leg gets wider.
Fuller, absolutely.
So conceivably, if Prof had a 36-inch circumference, the rise would be somewhere up around here. It would have to be to keep the proportions and to get the crease hanging. Because could you just flash that? Yes. See, you'll notice the crease really hangs very, very well on these. And this is what you aim for.
Just a piece of artwork.
Yeah, when you have a tailor that knows what he's doing and knows what you like, that's what you're going to get. And it just comes straight down. It's not pulling at the sides. One of the secrets, Prof told me this before we started the shoot today, one of the secrets is the fishtail. So, and also that you have your braces on the side, not too far in the front. So the braces are right here. This brace comes just at the top of the big pleat there, and then the one just behind it, so there. But is it the fishtail that enables you to get the balance?
Well, the fishtail is a different thing. I would have to take the jacket off to actually demonstrate.
Well, not to
that.
worry.
So if I'm gonna just put this here and just it's a little bit of some
right. Golly.
Management here.
Yes.
But I'm gonna take my coat off.
Aha.
And
watch closely, everybody. You're about to get a glimpse of the uncoated Proff.
And so that's the back.
And here you have Proff's back view.
And the question was, why do we use a fishtail?
Why do we have a fishtail?
Yeah. Because it just helps ease the pressure on the rest of the seat. If the back was straight and you hung them up with suspenders, there would be tension. So imagine you have a flat, it would be pulling it
right
up,
up,
right?
Yes,
and that distorts the waistband.
Right.
It distorts the shape of the waistband, which is basically designed to stay straight for the trouser to hang straight.
Yes.
Now, when you distort it,
they don't hang straight.
They don't hang straight. So to avoid that, we use a fishtail, right, which absorbs a lot of the tension coming from the suspenders.
Yeah.
It absorbs that tension. It almost acts like a shock absorber, and that allows the rest of the seats to
hang down,
to drape.
And you get a nice straight line all the way down the leg. Doesn't bunch in or anything like that. There we are, Prof. There's your coat back again. There we are. So that's, as it were, the bottom half of Proff's suit. And why did you decide a 3-button for this one?
Because I think the 3-button is just a little bit more playful. It's more casual.
Right.
So it's more casual, it's more playful. So this is what I would call a playful summer suit.
And that's what you call a casual fabric, is it?
This is a casual fabric. You can see it's got rough texture. Yes. And also all the design elements, the patch pockets and so on and so forth. So this is really this is a weekend suit. It's not, certainly not an office.
No.
Not a business suit.
Interesting, because if I didn't know better, I would say the fabric was burlap, but it's not. It's very, very sophisticated wool linen blend, as Prof told us. Now, let's veer from the single-breasted 3-button to the classic double-breasted. Now, what do you have to do when you're designing one of these compared to one of these? Because we're really looking at different physics here, aren't we? Because this one, it hangs down, each side hangs down the side. But this one, you're pulling it across, and I would imagine there's some scope there for making a real mess of it if you don't know what you're doing.
I mean, there are a lot of things going on here. I mean, first of all, you have to sort of, especially for double-breasted, right? I think one of the key things to determine is how much overlap you want.
Right, okay.
So, there are double-breasted that sort of have very little overlap.
Yes,
right?
yes.
They kind of hang like that.
Yeah,
and then they just sort of almost look like a single-breasted, right? And they just I think it depends.
Interesting.
I like sort of a high overlap.
So you've got a 6-button here, and that gives you the height, I guess.
Well, sort of the height is really sort of here at the cross, where the two lapels cross, right? So sometimes they cross much lower.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I like to have them cross very high right here. And like I said, I always like to use the lapel as a how can I call this? As a synthetic tie pin to hold the tie up.
Right, okay.
So rather than use a tie pin or one of those things, I like my lapels cut fairly high.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And they cross over fairly high, and that way it holds up your tie like that in 3 dimensions.
So but these buttons, are these at the waist, or are they a bit above the waist?
Slightly above. This would be slightly above the natural waist.
Interesting.
I've made this for me. Again, it depends on the customer. I mean, this is bespoke, so depends on the customer. But typically,
your waist is probably about there, isn't it?
Just right there, about
right
an
there.
inch.
Okay,
so this is slightly higher, just about an inch or so higher than my natural waist.
And then these are purely decorative, but they give it a sort of
it gives you sort of that wine glass
sense of a shape. Yes, exactly. So you told us earlier today in the show about how they make the lapel with the canvas and the collar. Now, they've this one is I guess, constructed in a similar way.
Of course, everything has to be done the same way.
So you've got the same concept.
You've still got the same concept.
Collar,
It's one piece of canvas.
One piece of canvas. And in fact, one big piece of cloth going down.
You can see actually here, you can see the stitching.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Yes, and there's quite a big stitch there.
This is just...
that's to hold the boutonniere down, yes. So the canvas is the same concept as on your single-breasted.
Correct.
But I'm just interested because when you do this, there's a risk, I guess, when you're fitting a double-breasted to somebody to get it just right so it doesn't pull, for example, or it doesn't hang too loose.
Well, it's again, it all comes down to the fitting, right? Not just the fitting, but the cut itself. Sometimes you have to adjust these anchor buttons, for instance.
Right.
If it's improperly positioned, right, it's going to cause the waist to pull.
Yeah, or it's going to pull it up a bit.
Or it's going to sort of cause it to bend that way. So you have to be very careful in placing this anchor button because it could throw the entire coat out of alignment.
It could.
It could make it seem like it's tight in the waist where it really isn't. It's just the buttons aren't positioned properly.
And then you like, I guess, a fairly straight lapel. Sometimes you see them with a bit of a belly in them. You like a straight lapel and almost...
Well, this has a slight belly. You can see
belly, yes.
It has a slight belly to it,
slight curve, yes.
But it's fairly straight from there up.
And almost horizontal here.
Yes, this is one of our signature moves. Most modern double-breasted coats tend to sort of be angled all the way
That's right, yes.
Right?
Yes.
Towards the top of the shoulder. We like to angle it slightly sort of towards the sleeve head, right?
Just a little angle there, isn't there?
And when you actually put this on the wearer, it looks sort of flatter. It looks more horizontal than it does on the mannequin.
And quite a broad collar coming down here. The gorge is here.
Right there, yes.
So it's a little bit higher than or it looks a little bit higher than on the single breast. It probably isn't.
Probably isn't. It's just sort of because the lapels are different, shaped differently.
And you still manage to get the back shape, the back drape there, just like we saw on the single breasted. So the concept of the back is the same.
Correct.
On the single, so only the front that's different.
Same pattern.
Now you like these side vents, isn't it?
Well, they're just more practical. For regular coats or regular jackets. Side vents, I prefer them. I mean, the only circumstance where a single center vent comes in handy is if you're an equestrian.
Right, which comparatively few of us are actually equestrians.
If you're an equestrian and you are riding, of course,
then you have the center vent. Yes.
Exactly. But besides that, I think on most people, a double vent looks far better.
Yes. And again, with the sleeves, we've got that real perfection there in the way that the sleeve hangs. A slightly roped shoulder, I think that's what you call it?
Correct. It's called a rope shoulder.
A slightly roped shoulder, so it sticks up a bit, and plenty of room there, but it's not floppy. It's not. There aren't big folds in it, and it's hanging pretty well straight down. So you've got a real art there in knowing just how to pitch the sleeve. It's not. Sometimes you see them in shops. Sometimes you see them in shops and the sleeves are sort of coming forward like that. But this one's obviously made for somebody who stands very straight with arms very, very straight.
Yeah, sometimes I could just look at a coat on a mannequin on a hanger and I could tell if the pitch is off by a lot.
Really?
Yeah, I can tell if, just when it's hanging on a hanger, I could tell when the pitch is off, even without actually putting on the coat.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And of course, I suppose there's not a lot you can do with the pitch once you've had the whole coat made up.
No, you can actually change.
Can you?
It's a very easy adjustment.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just literally just opening up the seam here.
Yeah.
And you can move this forward. You can pitch it forward.
Okay.
You can pitch it. Remember, you can take this whole thing completely off.
Right.
Yes.
You
can take the whole sleeve off. So you can sort of pitch it forward, you can pitch it backward to correct for the slit pitch.
Interesting. And then you've got pockets here with no flap. I think they call this jet.
It's a jacket or besom pockets.
Besom pockets, and so we don't have flap. There are quite a lot of optional things you can do, isn't it, with the effects that you can get and the little touches you can put on it. But I think this was the first AskOkey double-breasted jacket, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So it's held up well, and this one, the mannequin is a little bit too big. There we are. A little bit too stout, the mannequin.
Send it to the gym.
Yeah, we were sending it to the gym, yes, indeed. But what we have here then is 3 examples. The 1 button, the 3 rolled 2, and then the double-breasted here. Now we have another double-breasted, which we'll just quickly look at. Come on. There we go. We'll just quickly look at, because it's really a different design altogether, and that's, Prof, this one here.
Actually, this is a similar design. It just happens to be a 4x2.
Ah, okay.
It lacks the top buttons. We do have a different design, which is not here on stage, but this is very...
Because it looks a different shape.
It is the
Maybe
same...
partly the fabric with the herringbones makes it look like that?
Possibly, but it's the same, basically it's the same pattern as the other.
It just doesn't have the 2?
It doesn't have the top 2 buttons.
Okay.
But we have since then made a proper 6x2, which we don't have on stage here.
Yeah.
Slightly different. Again, we're talking just sort of minimal.
A longer lapel, is it?
Slightly longer lapel,
a
bit more angled, smaller lapels, a bit shorter, a bit narrower. But overall, the overall silhouette hasn't really changed.
And this is a jacket, not part of a suit.
That is an odd jacket.
Okay, so
that's
an odd jacket.
tweed jacket.
A tweed odd jacket, double-breasted. And some people, I think, might be reluctant to have a double-breasted odd jacket. But you can.
You can. It's just double-breasted is something considered sort of dressy. And sort of city wear,
That's
urban wear.
Yes.
Whereas tweed is a country cloth.
Yes.
So there's just sort of there's a contradiction there.
A little bit of a contradiction. But again, though, because of the pattern and the fabric, it looks a bit different.
Correct.
And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. When you go to your tailor and take a look at the cloth, you've got to be able to choose the right cloth for the particular cut that you want. And there's the back drape, and you'll see this is quite substantial back drape here with this fold. And that, again, enables you the mobility. It won't look quite so perfect on a human because, obviously, the mannequin is kind of built to be perfect.
It's built like a Greek god.
It's built like a Greek god.
And some of us are built like goddamn Greeks.
There we are. That's it. Well, not you, Prof, but...
some of us are built like goddamn Greeks.
But certainly, the mannequin maybe does have a slightly better
advantage.
A slight advantage over the rest of us. And the collar is quite high. Obviously, the shirt collar is high as well. You like your shirt collars high. But the collar is quite high compared, say, to my collar, which is much, much lower. And yours on that jacket is quite high as well. Is that just because, or is there a reason?
Well, if you cut a tall shirt collar, right? So it depends on the shape of the shirt collar.
Right.
You want to sort of have a certain distance.
You
want to show a certain distance. So if this is high and this is too low, then it just doesn't work.
No, it's not going to look right. No.
So because we cut a very, at least for me, I use a very high collar.
Yes.
Right, for my shirts.
Yes.
Both at the back and at the point collar as well. I use about 4 inches at the point collar and about 2 inches or so there.
Right.
So the coat collar needs to be correspondingly
right.
To just sort of ensure that you have a certain amount of shirt showing at the top.
So there you have it. And a double-breasted jacket, like the other one, similar to the other one, 4 buttons instead of 6. And because of the fabric, it ends up looking really very different. Now, we talked about, obviously, quite a lot today about the design and what you might call the layout of the thing and how it's all supposed to look. And we've talked about the construction a bit. It's unfortunate. We don't want to rip it open to take a look at what's really inside. But that would be actually quite interesting to see the canvas and to see the horsehair and the padding and all that. But you can feel on this one more padding than you could feel, say, on the others. Is that just my imagination, or is it actually?
No, it's not. It's not. The heavier the cloth, right, the more structure you need.
Right. Okay.
To hold it up.
Good.
Right. So for softer cloth, for instance, your softer summer cloths.
Right.
Sometimes you don't use horsehair canvas. You use sort of lighter canvas, like
linen canvas, maybe.
Right?
Yeah.
Linen canvas.
Hymar, I think they call it. Hymar, isn't it?
Yeah, linen, or even use sort of some kind of cotton or synthetic.
Okay.
But for heavier coats like this, you need sort of a little bit more structure to hold up the weight of the cloth. So even when you baste it, right, when you baste the chest, because for us, since we do the drape cut, we focus a lot on the structure in the chest. Yeah. So we reinforce and double reinforce because we're cutting excess fabric. If you think about it, right? So if you think about grid, how do I create drape? How do I get this drape, right? By cutting excess fabric across the front.
Yes.
Now, the problem with cutting excess fabric is that if you don't reinforce it, it collapses.
It just flops.
It just flops, right?
Yeah, so we can see, in fact, everybody, we can see, in fact, here on Proff's coat, there's obviously extra fabric because there's a fold right there.
But then it's reinforced, that's why it's sitting firmly. So you have to super reinforce it, right, to hold it up. And that's why for heavier fabrics, you need sort of more structure underneath to support that weight.
Now, you don't have to have bespoke to get that construction because you could do it in a factory. I mean, you could make a ready-to-wear jacket that was constructed in a similar way.
Technically, you could. But then, a factory-made garments are volume-based, right? So they're not just going to put in as much time as in a bespoke garment where you have someone actually sitting and doing the
and for this interlining and construction, you really have to do it by hand, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
You can't.
You can't
computerize it.
No, play games.
No,
you can't play games with it.
No, and of course the beauty of something that's made by hand is that it's always a little bit different each time.
Yes.
So you'll never get two
entire copies.
AskOkey jackets that are exactly identical to one another. Great stuff, Prof. Good. Well, thank you very much. It's an education for me, and I hope an education for everybody out there. So all of you, next time you go to a shop and look at the jackets in the shop, you can look with some element or level of expertise. Feel the front, feel what's in there, if it's a canvas or just glue. If it's glue, what you'll find is over time, it starts to bubble as the glue dries up and wears out, and eventually you've just got a floppy jacket. You check the construction, you look at the sleeve head, you look at the back, think about how much room you're going to have there, and so forth. It's all we've got time for. Thank you very much, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Don't forget, like and subscribe to the AskOkey podcast. Bye for now.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Most welcome, Prof.
Thank you.
Thank you.